Hey everyone, my name's Al Martine and welcome to TechWhirl's Fast 5 discussions. And boy, do we have a good one for you today. The idea of capturing and organizing and presenting information isn't new to technical communicators or even professional writers. But basically anyone in the communications field, it's the core of what we do. But for most of it, it's investigating a new feature, maybe documenting that information in a way that makes sense, and then communicating that information to our audience, often to be able to use a feature, to better understand how something works. It isn't life and death. It is just basically helping with understanding. It's standard. And while none of us really enjoy the hate mail or we get convicted in social media, by comparison, the stakes are fairly low. But what if the stakes were higher? The author's work of collecting, organizing, and sharing information would ensure that a crime is solved and the right people or person is held accountable. Well, that's what we're talking about today. Joining us is a police detective, writer, and teacher Josh Lee, and Northern Arizona University senior lecturer Erika Conrad to discuss law enforcement and technical authoring. Josh and Erika, welcome. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Al. It's good to be here.
Yeah, no, super. I am beyond excited for this conversation. This one I'm excited for all of them, and they're all equal. But this one is been super interesting as we've talked and we've prepped. It's such a unique subject, and Josh, we're super interested in understanding and learning a little bit more about you and about this type of writing and how it in your project that's coming up. But before we do that, Josh, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Joshua Lee. Now I'm a police sergeant. I recently promoted, so that's a good thing. But I work for a municipality here in the Valley, the Phoenix metro area in Arizona. My background a little bit in law enforcement is I served my time on patrol. I served 6 years on patrol, and then I moved to a unit called the Organized Crime Unit, and I specialized in anything financial. So all the money-related crimes, racketeering offenses, those are the crimes that my unit took. And I did that for about 6 years, and then I promoted, and here I am today.
Well, that's awesome. Well, congratulations on the promotion. That's
thank you.
Very exciting as well. Thank you for joining. Now, I heard that you're a big gardener and that you specialize in something called bioorganic gardening. What is that? Talk us through that. That sounds.
So I love gardening. That's one of my passions. It's kind of different than what I do normally, but biointensive gardening is where you create your own microclimate for your garden. So your whole garden takes care of itself. So it takes about 5 years to really set it up, but you build it up from the soil all the way to the types of plants that you produce. It all plays a really important role. And if you do it right, your whole garden just produces by itself and you don't have to do any work, which is really nice. Minus some trimming and pruning. But I never had a weed. I never had to do anything because of how I set it up. It's really fun. So it produces a lot of high quality organic fruit and vegetables. So it's really fun. Like it's really intense, and it's just wonderful that you can actually grow whatever food you want. So I grew all my fruits and all my vegetables that me and my family ate, and we had more than enough to share with friends and other family, and can it and jar it, and it's awesome.
There you go. We'll have to have you back on how the directions were set up and the documentation to help you get through 5 years to do that. But we'll save that for another Fast Five. So Erika, welcome back. Every October we get to all hang out. It seems like for everybody who maybe hasn't seen some of the ones before, or read some of your articles on TechWhirl, can you do a quick introduction of yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Al. My name is Erika Conrad, and I teach at Northern Arizona University, which is high in the mountains of Flagstaff, Arizona. And I teach in the professional writing program. It's all online, and we have a master's degree and a certificate program. I teach a bunch of different classes. I teach editing. I teach writing for the web, content strategy, introduction to technical writing, and also advanced technical writing. And Josh is one of our favorite students of all time. So I'm really happy to be here. Thanks so much for joining us, Josh. And thanks, Al, for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're super thrilled to talking again. Now, I heard you had been saying you have a new technical documentation class you were putting together or have already put together. What's happening with that new class?
Yeah, it's going to start next year, and it's technical documentation for both undergrads and graduate students. So everybody is going to be learning best practices for writing technical documentation, such as instructions, but other types of documentation as well. And the graduate students will get practice in managing a group of writers. So they'll learn some of the software that you can use as a manager of a team of writers, some of the techniques that are helpful. And we're working with iFixit. I don't know if you've heard of iFixit, but they provide instructions for all kinds of, especially technology, but even household items. So if your cell phone breaks, you can look on iFixit online and find instructions for how to fix it yourself. So we're going to be working on some of their instructions in our class.
Nice. Well, that's exciting as well.
Yeah.
Cool. Managing writers. That's has to be a challenging. I'm about to say there has to be some tips and tricks there. Yet another maybe another Fast Five. We can talk through ways to organize and support your writing team. But cool.
Yeah, great idea, Al.
So normally at this point, I would introduce Connie Giordano, editor, co-owner of TechWhirl. But at this point, she's on assignment downtown in the concrete jungle of Charlotte, somewhere helping others do some things. So she will be here in spirit, but isn't going to be able to join us today. So our thoughts are with her and the traffic that would have been her house in Charlotte. So anyway, we'll move on here. Before we get into the questions and we start asking all sorts of questions about the classes and Josh's work and how tech writing works there, I do want to talk about NAU's Professional Writing Graduate Certificate. NAU's been a long-time partner of ours, and that brings us here today. And the Professional Writing Certificate program was designed to provide a graduate level education and communication skills that are daily demand, from engineers, scientists, finance experts, police officers, everyone, professionals in work, business, industry, government, across the board. If you can't communicate, you're really not going to go far in your business. That's what this certificate is for. The hours are taken to obtain a certificate used to fulfill requirements in MA in English at NAU. Professional writing emphasis and a Master of Administration degree. So it plugs into other larger programs as well. We do appreciate NAU's longtime support. And if you have questions on it, we're going to soft sell this. We're going to talk about how it's helping Josh and other students during this conversation. If you come to TechWhirl's website, you'll see the advertisement on the right side there. Click on it. It'll take you to their site. You can dial in and then do a contact form and ask them any questions you may have. So anyway, encourage you to take a look at them. This is the hardest sell we're going to make on this. We'll reference it at the end, but that's how we got here today. So now we're going to start talking about Fast Five discussions. And these are 5 big questions. We got more than those today. Probably we narrowed it down from 20 in my mind on things I really wanted to know about this, about Josh and your work here and how you're using content management to help you with your job. But we're going to stay around 5 today. If you have a question, if you're watching this right now, it's October 22nd, and you have a question on Twitter, use the hashtag TWFAST5. I will be flipping back and forth trying to capture any questions you may have. If you get those in while we're actually recording this, we'll ask that question while we're on the air. But now it is time to begin. Josh, first question here for you. And the question really is question, what types of writing do you do as a detective?
So there's really three main types of writing in law enforcement. So the first one is the technical side of things. So you do have all your tech writing, and those are in the forms of police reports and supplemental police reports and actual like training documents. So we have a lot of technology that we wear on our person, like on our body, radios, tasers, but we have to write training documents for every little piece of equipment that we have. Those are all very technical style documents. In the middle, you really have legal research and writing. Let me move my mic. I think I'm echoing here. You have legal research and writing, and those are all the legal styles of writing. Those are your affidavits, your search warrants, your subpoenas, your seizure warrants. I work civil procedure, which is a whole different beast in the criminal justice world, and we write a lot of different civil legal documents. Charging documents. You have every unit has their own little documents that they actually use in the legal world. And then on the professional side of things, you have the professional documents. These are your reports. If you're assigned a project, a special project, you're going to be writing reports. And these are very similar to the reports that you write in grad school. You know, they require title pages and formatting and references and in-text citations. So it's very similar to what you do in school. And then you do a lot of memos and a lot of emails. And as an officer, you start on the bottom, and the majority of what you write is highly technical stuff. It's all police reports. It's all supplements. And then you do the occasional emails and memos. And everything at the officer level is pretty basic. But when you promote to detective, now that's a whole different beast. You are writing a lot. Actually, you're writing a little bit more than a lot. What is that? A ton? So when I switched over from patrol to detectives, I actually got carpal tunnel on both of my wrists because I was writing so much. And that's something that I didn't expect, that I was actually going to be writing the volume that I was writing. But after my rehab, I'm fine now. And yeah, from there, once you promote, you get further away from the technical side of writing and more towards the professional side of writing. More reports, lengthier memos, training documents, and everything along those lines.
Gotcha. All right. Yeah, absolutely. That's certainly a transition there. As you further and further up, becomes, I'm guessing, more argumentative in structure versus just technical documentation. So that would make sense. So the next question, Eric, I'm going to spin this one just a little bit. I realize as we're looking at these, as much as we really want to interrogate Josh here, I want to keep everybody in the conversation. So I'm going to ask this a slightly different way, and then slide over. From your experience with NAU's Master in Professional Writing, Erika, how have you seen this program and the graduates? How has it helped students and graduates of the program with their jobs every day? And what are some of the ways that graduating from the program does help students?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest helps is the emphasis that we place on knowing your audience. And that's the same in any kind of professional writing program, but I think that it helps you no matter what kind of writing you're doing to first think about your audience. What are they needing? What can I do to help them find information fast? What can I do to help them find information when they're in the middle of a very important project? They have no time to read through millions of words. What can I do to make their lives easier? And I think Josh experiences that on a daily basis, because the kind of writing that he does is for people who don't have time to be reading a lot of words, and they need to find information fast. And as you said before, Al, it sometimes is a matter of life and death. So I think that's my top helpful thing about our program.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Josh, in your experience with the NAU program, how has it changed your writing and helped you day to day?
Oh, it's completely changed my life. And Erika kind of ruined ruined it for me because now I see documents in a completely different way. And the stuff that bothered me or never bothered me before drives me crazy. The skim factor on documents, like Erika was saying, the skim factor and the usability of the actual document, finding the information quickly. I tailor all my documents, even police reports, to fit that model. It's some of the reports that I did as a detective were so lengthy. I'm talking hundreds of pages long, and trying to condense that material into a user-friendly document is really tough, but it's easy when you understand the stuff that we're learning at NAU. So a lot of the white space, I'm a huge fan of white space. White space subheadings. I use bold. I use different types of fonts. I use all sorts of stuff to make my document user-friendly. And so I'm able to apply everything that I'm learning at NAU. I'm able to apply it out in the real world, which is really hard to say about academic programs. I have a lot of different degrees, and NAU's degree is the only one that I can use. And I could say this, I use it almost every single day. If I'm writing it, I'm using what I know and what I've learned from NAU. And I can't say that about any of my other degrees that I have. So it's changed my life. So it's been really good.
All right. Right on. Yeah. The upside is, you know how to write better. The bad side is you're truly suffering from seeing all the other bad writing. So
horrible.
You're like, no, don't structure it that way. Yeah. So that makes perfect sense to me. In the introduction, you said, now a sergeant, but also a freelance writer. What type of writing do you do as a freelancer?
So my little genre that I do is law enforcement technology, and then obviously financials and financial crimes. Those are my little niches. That's what I like to do. So the majority of what I write are related to law enforcement technology and with some kind of financial aspect behind it. I do a lot of content editing, content marketing, and then I help other people that want to express their views. So a lot of whistleblowers, for example, that are afraid to come out, and because it's scary as a whistleblower to come out and blow the whistle on something. So I'll help them write what they want to truly write and edit what they, edit their information in a way that they're not going to get themselves into trouble or be retaliated. And that's my business. That's kind of what I do.
All right. Well, that's super critical and very unique, isn't it? Yeah. If you had a few tips for people who do want to start freelancing and technical professional writing or an editor, do you have some kind of key tips for them?
Oh, absolutely. So it sounds cheesy because it kind of is, but a lot of the self-help books, self-improvement books, they fall back on getting to know yourself. You really have to understand who you are as a person, what you are able to do, what you want to do, what's your true passion. You have to set boundaries. There's certain things that I won't write about and won't help others write about. You really have to have the discipline to be able to set those boundaries. So the more you understand and know yourself, the better you are going to be as a writer. It's impossible to write a good article or a good document if you're not passionate about what you're writing. Readers can easily see right through your words, and they pick up on little tiny cues like, this guy's he doesn't really like this, and they could tell. And so the very first tip I would say is getting to understand yourself and getting to know what you like and what you don't like. Very important as a freelancer. The second is actually just doing it, writing. Getting started, you have to write. There's lots of students that I have as well that they want to be a writer, but they don't want to do it. So it's kind of hard. So you actually have to get started writing. I got started writing for free. That's probably the easiest. It's the easiest way to get published is writing for free. I don't necessarily recommend doing that for a long time because it's not sustainable, but it gets you. It gets publications underneath your belt that are required by other businesses. So a lot of the businesses that I work with require, previous publications. They want to see that you're published. And unfortunately, most people want to see that you're published. And so you kind of have to work for free a little bit to get those publications under your belt before you can actually get published somewhere else. Once you get published, you really need to start working on your writing. That's why I joined, one of the reasons why I joined NAU's professional writing masters is because I needed to work on a lot. I thought I was a good writer. I'm a university professor, previously published in a whole bunch of different articles and magazines internationally. And I thought I was a good writer until Erika ruined it all for me. And no, but now I understand, wow, these are all the things that I really do need to work on. And I'm taking everything that I'm learning from NAU and I'm applying it to what I do now. The main article or the main business that hires me, the editor, loves me now because she doesn't have to edit any of my work. It's already comes edited. She just has to format it in whatever format they're putting it in, and off it goes. So if you could make your editor happy, then you're going to be happy because they're going to give you a lot of projects. So that's really helped me, taking all the information that I've learned at NAU and then applying it as a freelancer. So you really got to hone in your skills as a writer and just progress, always progress and keep writing and just do it.
That makes sense. Erika, any other tips?
About becoming a freelance writer? Yeah, I really appreciate what Josh said about learning yourself, getting to know what you're passionate about, getting to know what you don't like. A lot of times the easiest thing to do is to figure out what you don't like, and then you'll find what you do like. So I think especially if you're not used to looking inside, that's a really good way to do it, is to figure out, well, what do I not want to write about? What bores me to death? And that will lead you to what really excites you. And go, wow, I really like this. So yeah, I really appreciate what you said, Josh, about getting to know yourself and also about volunteering, writing things for free. In our program, we have a capstone project, which is the last thing that master's degree students do. And a lot of our students do volunteer work for that project. So it's instead of a thesis. A lot of master's degree programs require a thesis, but we don't. We require a practical capstone. And I just had an email yesterday from an alumna who wrote a grant proposal for a school as her capstone project. And she ended up doing a lot of work for them for free after she did her capstone. And now she has a full-time job somewhere else, but they loved her so much that they want somebody just like her, but they're going to pay them. So I was so excited to hear that news. That really made my day yesterday.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's capstone projects are certainly a great stepping stone to getting that next job. I finished graduate school. One of our final, we had a capstone and did consulting work for a small organization. And yeah, and it gives you something to put on your resume. You learn a good bit about it and kind of pulls it all together. You apply it after everything you've learned. So that makes perfect sense. And used to be a fundraiser, so I understand how hard those grants apps are to pull together.
Yeah.
So Josh, what is your law enforcement audience? What are some of the unique items there about writing for that group?
So the law enforcement audience that's a tough group. There's two different groups within the law enforcement community. You have one side, which are all the pro law enforcement. These are active law enforcement. These are retired law enforcement, people that work for government, and people that really support law enforcement. And on the other half, you have a lot of lobbyists. You have senators. You have a lot of people that are kind of anti-law enforcement. You have people that don't like the police. And so you really have two different groups that you always have to keep in mind when you write anything law enforcement related. Because one side is going to try to jump on what you say or write, and kind of try to spin your words a little bit or your sentences. And so you really have to be cognizant on what you're actually writing and pay attention on how it could affect both sides. Sometimes you want it to affect both sides, sometimes you don't. So you really do have to pay attention to everything that you write. Now, the law enforcement community on the active side, so say it's an active law enforcement, pro law enforcement, we're very cynical in nature. We don't trust a lot of people. And we could actually see a lot through I guess it'd be like the BS in a document. So if you don't know your material, you don't understand your material, well, the law enforcement community, they will understand that you don't know what you're talking about, and they will eat you alive. And that's something that and I tell the writers that are getting into writing for law enforcement, you better know your material, because something that we also don't do is we don't really forget things. And so if an officer or some part of the community says, hey, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, well, he's going to remember your name forever. And so it's always going to kind of taint him and kind of ruin his view on you. So you got to really understand the material that you're writing. And if you don't know something, it's okay to not know it. So respect is a big thing within the law enforcement community. So they can see right through a lot of those little issues when they read. You also have a big variety of different people, big diversity. You have people from, 8th grade education all the way up to postgraduate education. You have, and everybody in between. So you really have to be aware of who you're writing for. So just like Erika said, in the master's program, they put a big emphasis on knowing your audience, and you have to be adaptable and flexible when you're writing, because if I'm writing an academic article, I need to know who is going to be reading that article, and I need to adjust it accordingly. If I'm writing a professional article, well, good. There's, a bunch of different types of law enforcement. Well, which group am I actually writing this for? And you really have to pay attention to the little things as law enforcement. Another thing is it's kind of hard for an outsider to get into law enforcement writing if you're not in law enforcement, because you need to know that terminology. So I always encourage even my students is take criminal justice courses, start talking, hanging around police officers, getting to know them, because the more you can adapt how you write to better fit your audience, which is the whole point of professional writing, the better off you're going to be. And so it's a very unique, interesting field. So there's a lot of little tidbits and a lot of little things within your writing that you really have to pay attention to. And then we're all pretty strong A personality types, so we don't like a lot of fluff. That's a big thing. Is the plain English, going to plain English, not dumbing it down, but making it simplified, making it easier to read. Those are all very important aspects of law enforcement writing. We don't really like to read artsy fartsy type documents. Most of us don't.
Yeah, that would make perfect sense. So Eric, here's a question for you, off script here a little bit. So one of the things Josh mentioned was, if you didn't know something, don't try to make it up. You have to say, I don't know. What if you are in the process of writing or presenting, what tips would you have for your students or anybody watching this if you just didn't know? What are some ways to professionally say that versus the way my son goes, I don't know. The hands up.
don't know.
Well, good. I think there are better approaches. What tips would you have?
Well, first of all, you notice my lights went off and on is because I've been too still. If you're still for 15 minutes, the lights either go on or they go off. So.
You must be in a government office. That's like my office at work. You're always like,
yeah, if I do this, I'm turning the lights on. But yeah, anyway, I really like your son's method. I don't know. And actually, I think that human connection is really great. We're all human, and we like to connect on that level. And I think that asking your audience for help is really helpful. So if you're presenting and you're speaking and someone asks you a question and you don't know the answer, I like to hear what other people's views are in the audience. What do they know? And we can build a little bit of group knowledge. And I think that's helpful. But I do agree that it's really important to say you don't know. If you're writing something and you don't know, actually, that's a lot of my working life is actually getting excited about things I don't know. And I get to, because of Google, I get to spend a lot of my time finding stuff out. And I think that's one of the joys of being a professional writer is we get to learn new things all the time. And we have to go out and research them in order to write about them. Yeah.
That makes sense. Josh, in some of yours, especially if it's in a report or something and it's not something you could research yet or you're going to, are there ways that you write around it? Is it, you put brackets in to say to be TBD, or do you have any tips there? Or
yeah, absolutely. So my number one tip is networking. You have to network. I've been networking for almost a decade. I have somebody in almost every single field that I could possibly, imagine. So if I get stuck, go to somebody else and don't be afraid to ask somebody else. So I was writing this article a couple of months ago, and there was a section that I was completely stumped on. I couldn't write it. Well, I could write it. I could make stuff up and kind of finagle but like I said, if you do that in your writing, it's going to show and they're going to know. So instead, I try to find somebody else that knows that information, and then you can just use the information that they give you. You could give them the quote, so you can put them in the article, so they get recognition. You get the information that you need. It's really a win-win in those cases. So building up a network, that's how I get around it. Is I really try to find out who knows that information, and I go directly to that source. And that's my approach, and that's how I like to do it.
Yeah.
See why we love Josh? This is one reason we love Josh so much.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And certainly having your sources, that way you can quote them, or you can, if you
makes it so much easier.
Investigations, you can interview them for an hour. Yeah, no, that's that makes perfect sense. So I know when I was in consulting, you have your graduate level book stuff, but you have to go out and you're working with clients, and they're paying a fair amount of money to have you in the room to talk with them. And I remember our senior partners, in the conversations as we were getting onboarded in the term, and they're like, you never say, I don't know. You say, I don't have a lot of visibility into that right now, but I will get back to you. Let me know. I will check and get back to you. So you can say it without, hey, you got me. Like, really?
When I do professional presentations, sometimes I'll actually do that. I'm like, I don't, because I don't know. And so I'll say, hey, I don't know, but I'll find out.
Yeah. Let's write that on our board.
It's not a good thing to say, I don't know. Let's go to the next topic. It's never good to do that. So say, I don't know, but let me write it down, and then I'll try to find the answer. So on the presentations, I'll go back and I'll try to find look up the people in my network and see, okay, who knows this? Let me call them. And then I'll just give them a quick call, and hopefully they'll answer, and then I can get a pretty immediate response. And that's, yeah. But I'm pretty blunt, as Erika knows now. So if I really don't know anything, I don't know it. It's okay. I just don't know.
I was teaching a course, marketing, social media, and it's been a while ago, and different subjects and blogging, which I understand, and social media, Facebook stuff, and Twitter and all that stuff. I generally get it. I got it. I sometimes I don't get it, but I understand it. And so one of the subjects, though, was Snapchat. And I can tell you that, given my age and my life and my experience, I knew nothing. I couldn't see a business point. I know there's a bunch of people rushing there because it's the new hot thing, but I'm like, I have nothing. I prepped for the classes. I worked. It was my first time teaching, so I busted my tail and trying to do all this extra research, and I still can never get a coherent thought on it. And I went to ask the audience, and walked in. I went, today we're supposed to talk about Snapchat, and I don't know anything. I am lost. I want you guys to tell me what we're supposed to know, and I'm going to write it down. And I can tell, and we did. I don't remember the point of it. I still don't have much value in it from a business perspective. But I remember that class being probably the most engaged my students were the entire time, other than when we had some guest speakers. And they talked through it. Hey, this is how I use it. And I remember writing it down and summarizing it and sending it to them. But yeah, asking more knowledgeable people, and yeah, if you can phone a friend sort of thing, that is absolutely.
That's my motto.
Somebody who knows, man, because I don't. Yeah, but yeah, that's my two types on there. So, all right, let's talk a little bit about good technical writing. How's it help you with your investigations?
On how technical writing helps?
Yeah.
Well, it helps document. So technical writing and knowing how to write really does help. Not so much your investigations, but the backside of your investigations. Well, let me bring that back a little bit. So as an officer, what you write is really important because that information is going to be pushed along to other people. So understanding your audience, understanding who's going to be reading that document is crucial. And so, like for me, when I was as an officer, I didn't really care. I'm like, I'll just write it up, and I didn't really think about who was actually going to read it. But now I know, being a detective and then a sergeant, that's not the case. So you really have to pay attention. So understanding how to write, you could go into the investigations and gather the information that you really need. So the different types of witnesses, the evidence, and you do it in a logical order out in the field, because that makes it a little bit easier to write your document when you come back. So knowing how to write does help a little bit as far as investigations, but it really helps others that are looking at your information for their investigations. So a lot of the detectives will take what you wrote and they'll use that to further their investigation. So the better you are as a writer on the back half, the more successful you're going to be in the overall case, because everybody relies on what you're trying to say.
Gotcha. Where is this stored? Like, so, and I'm sure different police organizations have different tools, but you're not, when you say you're writing it up, are you typing this in Word? Is it Google Docs? Is it a special program that's used by your organization? Where are you actually capturing this?
So all law enforcement agencies nationwide. So something that you'll get to know here soon is nobody's consistent. So there's no uniformity in nationwide. So we all do things a little bit differently. Now, the majority of every law enforcement agency has some type of system that they can dump all the information on. So you're not going to be saving it in a Word document and saying, this is my police report. You're going to be actually using, it's called a report management system, an RMS system, to manage your reports. But you could type it in Word, which is what I recommend, because they have, if you know how to set up spell check correctly, you can catch most of your mistakes. If you just type it in Word and then copy and paste it into your report management system. Now, that's just one aspect of it. So every agency and every unit has their own different system as well. So we have a main group, so a main report writing system that's used for everybody. And then in my unit, for example, I used a bunch of different systems depending on which agency I was working with and where the report was going to go. So not only did I do it in one system, I might have done it in 3 or 4 other systems, the same report. So it can kind of get a little bit complicated. The most important, obviously, is accurate information, getting the numbers right, and just double checking everything. Because what you write as a law enforcement officer can really affect somebody's life, for better or worse. And you really need to know that information is accurate and that it's not going to be interpreted incorrectly. And so that's kind of interesting.
Right on. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, because I knew stuff I knew. You weren't handwriting at all and copying it. I knew you weren't typing it on a typewriter, but other than that, totally different.
So 12 years ago, I guess they were more than 12 years. So I've been in law enforcement. I just hit my 12th year. And it was probably through only 3 years. So probably 15 years ago, they're all handwriting it. Some agencies still handwrite police reports. I pull a lot of the high profile cases from around the nation. That's part of my Capstone project that I'm doing, but I'm pulling a lot of police reports from around the nation. And I am super surprised that people are still handwriting police reports.
Wow.
I can't get over that. And it's so much easier just to do it in Word. It's more accurate. There's one report. It was a very high profile case. One of the officers wrote what he did, but it was 2 lines and I couldn't even read it. So I was like, okay, well, what did you do? I don't know. Yeah. So they still do it. They still handwrite. I don't necessarily recommend that, but at least everybody in Arizona, they type it up.
Yeah, it'd be a little easier to read, even if it's Comic Sans or something. Yeah, it sounds very similar. The healthcare industry has a similar problem in which scripts and the notes that doctors take during their procedures and during your like checkups and stuff, you know, traditionally has been handwritten, but doctors are notorious, and I'm guessing police officers as well, notoriously bad handwriting because you're doing so much. You start cutting shortcuts, and you can't see the next person who reviews it. Makes it hard to understand. So that's maybe another discussion. Maybe it's or at least investigation, right? So before we want to talk about your Capstone project and where you're going with it. Erika, you gave a little bit of a talk about the Capstone project. Can you re-summarize exactly what this is and maybe what it isn't, and then we'll have Josh. We'll have you talk through what you're doing for yours.
Yeah, we like our students to create something that is either publishable. So some of our students create articles that they then submit for publication, or something that you can include in your portfolio, your professional portfolio. So it should be some kind of content that is something you can impress a new boss with, or something that you can use to show a client, hey, this is what I can do. So we've had students do all kinds of things. So as I mentioned before, grant proposals. Some of our students have set up their online portfolio. So they've set up a web page that has their portfolio in it. And also is their way of advertising their freelancing business. So we've had students do that. We've also had students create documents or content that is directly applicable to their work. So for example, we've had students create user manuals that they are actually using at work, or they create policy documents for their work. Things like that. Something that's completely practical is what we want our students to do.
All right. Josh, what are you working on?
So my Capstone project is a smaller portion of my overall bigger project. So in law enforcement, we're taught how to write a specific way in the police academy. And then outside the police academy, we never really get any kind of additional training with police reports. And so I pulled all the police report manuals and books that I can find on how to actually write a good police report. And they're all extremely similar. They're all designed for academy use and basic, like first year officer use. And that's really not sufficient for what we need now. The game has kind of changed in law enforcement over the past 5 years, and we really need to get our writing under control. Because like I said, there's 2 different groups in law enforcement, and you might have that anti-group that is going to attack every single thing that you do and write. And unfortunately, we're not preparing for that. So my capstone project is going to be probably 1 or 2 chapters of a big textbook that I'm writing. I'm taking everything that I'm learning at NAU's program, everything that I've learned on the academic side as a university professor, and then everything I've learned as independent study. So most of these books, here we go. Most of those books right there are they're all writing books. So I read every single book that NAU has recommended, and then I go and I purposely try to find additional readings. And so I'm going to be combining everything into a massive, comprehensive textbook that a first-year officer can take, or a 15-year, detective can use in their investigations. And that's going to be very unique. Another unique aspect on what I'm doing in this project is all my examples are actually going to be real examples. I've been pulling police reports for almost 18 months, gathering examples of bad writing and good writing in police reports. I've been doing the same thing with academic reports. So a lot of the reports a lot of the examples that I'm going to be using, actually all of the examples that I'm going to be using are going to be academic and police related real life examples. And that's huge, because a lot of the textbooks that we have in law enforcement are written by non-law enforcement personnel, and the examples that they give us, we can't really use them. Like, it's a good example, but it's not really applicable to what we're doing. So having these real life examples are really going to help. So my overall project at NAU is going to be I want to be able to get the full outline of my textbook done, and at least a chapter or 2, and maybe some interviews with that, and then work from there.
If you can share it, if you can think of one, this is another off-script question, but you were saying you get a lot of examples that you can't apply, and you're using some. So what's an example of that, where you've gotten an example? But one, if it doesn't come to mind, again, we prep for this, but can you think of one that sort of, you'd see it doesn't do much for you, but what you would replace it with?
So a lot of the examples are actually written by English professors. So they're even criminal justice professors don't really write, police, anything related to police reports. The majority of all the report writing textbooks that we have are actually English professors. And so they'll give this example on, it talks about the importance of doing a good investigation. Let's say like a shoplifting investigation, and the suspect stole, $500 worth of merchandise and ran out the door, and then, we chased him and we caught him. Well, they write the typical example would be, well, Billy was arrested for this and this, period. And it doesn't really go into the specific details that we need. It's just super, super, super basic, overly basic. I don't know if that answered the question.
It does. So, absolutely. So yours would do what? So obviously you still set up the same premise, but then
yes, yeah. So there's a lot of little things that you got to take into consideration when you write, and it's including enough information and eliminating the information that you don't necessarily need. And that's where a lot of the textbooks fail right now, is explaining what you do need and what you don't need. And if it's written by a non-law enforcement personnel, it's really hard to know exactly what you need. They might miss, like on the shoplifting example, they might give you an example and say, you should write it like this. Well, you missed 4 or 5 aspects from the law that you have to have in your police report. So you need to include this and this and this, like these information, because this is required by the law to be able to charge it. And so that's kind of the hiccup that we have with a lot of the report writing textbooks that are out there right now, is they're just not, the examples that they use aren't applicable. We can't really use them. It's good, it's good information, but it's not like, whoo, I could actually do this.
No, that's cool. Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense, and that's where you're getting into the experience of being able to, for folks who are kind of writing about it because they did some reading and maybe a little bit versus living it and then being able to share it. That makes perfect sense. We wish you luck on it. Any idea? Here's a question that no writer wants. Was it oh gosh, which writer said I love the sound? Was it Stephen King? I love the sound of deadlines as they go whooshing by. Like, any idea when the first draft is plans there?
I'm going to work. So as soon as I'm done with classes that are required, I have, I think, 2 more required classes left. And then I have my capstone project. I'm working on it now. And so I have to try to find time, like to really buckle down and get it done. I'm kind of overextended myself over the past 6 months or so. And so as soon as I could get some time and actually devote my time to it, I'll be able to buckle it down and get it done pretty quick. I didn't realize how much information that I'm actually going to use until I started doing research, and I'm like, wow, that's books and books and books and books I'm trying to condense. So hopefully by the end of the next year, it'll be all published and ready to go. Once I get started, it's not. Once I have a little bit of an ADD problem, and so once I get started, I'll get it done because unfortunately all my energy will be kind of thrown at it. So my goal is end of next year, I'll have at least a first draft and maybe the first edit done, and then we'll work from there.
Good deal. Well, wish you luck on that. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Erika, question for you as the professor. He's getting all this information. We sometimes get the overwhelming amount of information. Ideas or tips that you will provide your students on how to boil that down into the information that's the right stuff to put into a document?
Yeah, I was listening to you, Josh, saying that there are a lot of books there, and oh, there goes my life.
Question every 14 minutes, or she's like taking off the broadcast.
But anyway, Josh, I want to encourage you to not try to put it all in one book, that maybe this is a whole series of books. And I think that is awesome. So that's one thing, is if you've got too much information, maybe you've got more than one book in you. Maybe you've got more than one project in you. So it's actually great to have all that extra information. Don't throw it away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's good to have the next decade covered in the stuff that you're doing on the side. Between that and the farming, I think you're covered, man, and all the other things you got going on. So you heard it here first. A series of books coming out.
Well, there's the textbook is actually separated in. It's going to be separated into 3 different sections. So for beginner entry level officers, those are going to be very similar to what you see elsewhere. But then you go into advanced, more detective style writing and legal documents. And then the third is all risk mitigation and risk management within the document itself. So there is really a potential for 3 different books. So I might have to do that just because it might be a textbook that's 4,000 pages long, and that might not be the best option.
Hard to fit in your backpack.
I'm trying to make it user friendly, and it's like this big.
Little press button thing where it drops down and goes beside you, so you don't have to carry it. It would innovative, or just an ebook, I guess. All right. Well, we certainly, that's been super interesting, and we're. Time is moving on us, and we do appreciate you taking some time here and answering our questions. And frankly, I've written down a couple questions that I'm not even going to be able to get to, but it's Josh and Erika, thank you so much for your time and for sharing. It's really engaging, and it's a different, from anyone who hasn't worked in that industry or has ever watched a TV procedural and has interest in it. It's neat to hear just a little bit about the inner workings and ways that the ways you're applying the craft of professional writing. So I do appreciate it. If you have any additional questions, somebody watching this and you haven't been able to see it live, but you've caught it on YouTube or our Facebook channel or whatever, if you do go ahead and use the FAST5 hashtag that I shared, that's the hash TWFAST numeral 5, and you have a question for Josh, Erika, recommend go ahead and use it. We'll pass it over to them and see if they can get an answer for you. I can't imagine that there won't be questions that kind of arise out of this. Heck, we could probably do a second presentation and just talk through some of the finer details here.
Absolutely, that'd be fun.
Other things I want to share, again, we do recommend if you are in the market and you're starting to think that maybe a professional writing certificate or the MA that we've referenced a few times today is interesting, do go to Google it. NAU Professional Writing Certificate will bring them up. Come to our website, the ad's there, click on it. You'll get to a contact form. They'll reach out and you can ask questions. I think there's some informational sessions that are there. So they'll definitely answer your questions. Just certainly consider this writing certificate. You can hear some of the stuff in between portfolio and some of the big takeaways that we've had Josh just share, and we've had other students in previous years talk about how they've been able to set up their own businesses and whatnot. But it's certainly a powerful degree and a powerful education that can certainly help you in your career. So we do recommend everyone at least take a look at it, consider it, and then make the decision when the time's right, because it is a commitment of time and energy and effort. So we certainly recommend all that. Josh, Erika, thank you again. We appreciate it. Connie, wherever you are out there, we hope it's going well on assignment. And for everybody watching this, we do appreciate your time. Thank you so much. I hope you have a good rest of the day. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.